All right, we are online. We are live right now. And that's my main Ronnie. Um, Hello, everyone. I'm sure it would be a good morning or a good afternoon or a good evening or probably pretty late in the night in various parts of the world from where people would be watching this. Welcome to another Google Hangout on my channel where I try and spread knowledge and information about things that matter to people. Today, I have with me Kiran Sanjeeva. He is, if I may call, an expert in the issue of international parental child abduction. Now, this is a very complicated subject. A lot of people have absolutely no idea about it. But people who suffer because of this are people in deep, deep distress because of the uh, challenges thrown at them by the system, by the laws, by their own spouse, and they go through extreme ordeals to battle this situation. So I would not take too much of time to get into the discussion, and I will get it there right away. Kiran, why don't you begin by telling us what international parental child abduction is really about?
Yeah, so international parental child abduction is when one parent takes his or her own child across international borders without the consent of the other parent. It's as simple as that. The problem is that with international borders being involved here, the challenges with the two jurisdictions, two legal systems, and all those things arise, and that is what complicates the matter very hugely for both the children involved in such a problem, as well as the parent who is left behind to deal with the situation. This is a very common phenomena that has been going on for several years since the mobility of people has changed drastically due to the dissolving borders, and hence there have been international treaties and protocols put in place to deal with such situations. So in a summary, that's what it is. It is um, conflicts in marriages that lead to one disgruntled parent moving away from their one country and going and settling in another country and refusing the child born with the left behind parent.
Okay.
So in this context, we'll be talking about two terms: left behind parent and abducting or taking parent. Left behind parent is the parent who has lost the child to such a abduction, and the taking or abducting parent is the one that caused the situation by abducting the child.
Okay. Kiran, I would request you to keep yourself in the center of the camera so that,
Okay.
yeah, people could have a
Got it.
better view of you. Yeah, that's much
Yeah.
better. One thing that I really wish to stress upon, and this may be a genuine concern or a question of a lot of people. Now, one parent taking away the child,
Mhm.
in normal terms or in normal, the way the understanding of a common person would be if one parent is taking away the child, then it cannot really be called abduction. So how does this term abduction comes into play? If you could delve a little bit on this.
Right. In most modern societies, the child is considered an individual having their own rights. The parents' rights are separate from those of the children. And most modern societies have accepted that a child needs two parents for a full blown development until maturity. Father and mother both bring different aspects to the upbringing of the child,
Right.
and no one person, no one parent should hold the right to deny bond with other parent. That's the crux of the issue. So, having recognized this and accepted this fact that a child alone has individual rights. These societies have made sure that any attempts to disrupt that is would be considered a crime.
All right.
And that is where they have made a lot of these modern societies have made parental abduction itself as a crime. And in fact, I think even in the Constitution of India, that would be the case. However, the laws have not clarified that to a great extent.
All right. What are the major challenges when I discuss? Because, of course, this, like I said in the beginning, this is something that
Mhm.
across the world. But when we talk about the equation with India, what
Mhm.
are the major differences that we have, which put a lot of, which changes the equation in these issues? Like, what are the challenges we particularly are facing when it comes to, or when the child is taken away from any other country to India? What are the challenges that the people who are left behind, the parents who are left behind face?
That's a very good question. As far as India goes, the first hurdle that we find is that uh, parental abduction is not even considered a crime. And hence, there is a hodgepodge of laws which deal with custodial rights, different depending on different marriage laws and all that stuff. For Hindus it is one thing, for Muslims it is something else, and there's a hodgepodge of laws which say that, oh, until this age this child is okay to be with the mother, and until that age with the father, and things like that. And these are really outdated laws which do not belong to the modern society. Most of them are even actually pre-British era laws. So the society has changed and evolved a lot in the way the parents, deal with this kind of a family situations these days. There's no more joint families and things like that. People go to work and things like that, and society has not kept up with these things. So the first challenge is that it is not considered a crime in India. Second challenge is that shared parenting as a concept is still in its very infancy in India compared to other Western countries. Even though India has adopted a lot of the Western standards in this realm, it is sorely lacking. I think that's another challenge, and we find it very common in the courts to not even afford basic access. Like, even when some parent from a foreign country is making a trip all the way to India and pleading for visitation, the courts simply are not willing to accept that somebody is making this effort and grant even a few minutes of visitation. So this is really.
Unfortunate. I mean, that's absolute denial of rights of a parent
Yes,
as a parent,
yes,
no matter what the situation is. I mean, at the end of the day, the father or the mother is the father of the mother of the child. So, how can courts be just so erratic in their judgments? I'm like, that's
right.
so sad.
And the other thing is interesting is that according to the Guardians and Wards Act of India,
Mhm.
uh, it clearly says that a court should not even accept a custody dispute when it is not being presented in the court of the ordinary residence of the child. This is a very important concept, which also goes into the laws in Western societies where it's considered a crime. It's called a habitual residence.
Correct.
So the problem is that even though this is clearly mentioned in the law in India, the courts simply take over jurisdiction of the case, no matter what the situation of the child is. If the child is foreign born, or just come here for visitation, for a vacation visit, they don't care. They just say, you have put forth a petition. Yes, we are going to decide on this case. So in fact, it should be, according to India's laws itself, they should be dismissing it right away in the very the lowermost courts. But that's not happening.
Yeah, I think the answer to that probably would be in a question that I wish to ask you, and then we could
Mhm.
probably assess. What is the percentage of left behind parents? How many percentage of these? How many percent are men or fathers
Mhm.
whose child has been taken away, and
Mhm.
how many of these are mothers whose child has been taken away by the father? Like, how many left behind parents are fathers, and how many left behind parents are mothers?
Okay, I live in the US, so and US government thankfully puts out official reports, annual reports on the abduction cases, unlike other countries like UK and Australia.
Hmm.
So from a US perspective, what we know as of last year is that around 65% of them are women abducting parents, and 35% are men abducting parents.
Mm.
And I think the same percentages can be extrapolated to other countries as well. So we can say that it's not really a 50-50 or 5% and 90%. No, it's not like that. It's pretty close to significant numbers for both genders.
Right, and that's very interesting because whatever I know or whatever I have followed this issue is, and because of and we will speak about it later in the discussion. The Hague Convention is not India is not a signatory to it, and when Bindal report came out on this matter, one of the major observations was, and this is for the audience to know. Like we always know what happens in the Indian courts. A woman is always considered to be the victim of marital violence or domestic violence, and hence
Mhm.
the Bindal report. There's a Bindal report on this issue particularly, and where it was decided or it was contemplated whether India should be a signatory to the Hague Convention or not, treaty or not, which deals with these matters. And one of the major observations was that, the women who actually take the kid away to India are women who are victims of domestic violence. So it would be extremely unfair to have these cases be decided in the habitual country of the child, because he is a woman who is a victim of domestic violence, has run away. It doesn't matter whether domestic violence was there or not there. It doesn't matter what was the reason of the separation, but it's the opinion. The larger opinion is that she's a victim of domestic violence. But when you tell me, Kiran, that there are 35% fathers who are taking away the child and coming to India, then I think that logic completely fails, right? I mean, then that would not be the assumption that this man would be a victim of domestic violence and hence running away. So I think this is a very gender neutral problem.
Indeed, it's a very wrong wrong thing put forth by the feminist leaning organizations that do not that want to maintain the status quo, because there's a lot of funding involved in foreign funding that they get for keeping these issues alive. If the issues go away, they don't get funding. They don't have any reason to demand funding, and so they use these kind of pretexts to derail the real discussion. If you look at even the statistics of women that have fled, like my wife, to India with a kid, you will notice that almost 90% of them are highly educated women,
Mm.
doctorate, masters, and these kind of degrees. And they are very well educated enough to know that there are civil remedies possible,
Mm.
and they are very well aware that I mean, it's common knowledge that these are women who live in Western civilized society with strong laws for women's protections. I
Right.
mean, in the US, it's not a joke to harass a woman and go scot free. No, it's not possible at all. So how are these people not able to even find such educated people knowing fully well to know their rights, know their children's rights, and know how to contact the law enforcement agencies and embassies and consulates of their respective countries and get assistance? Why would they flee? It's because if a lot of studies have been made, and one of the patterns that has been seen in these kind of people, whether it is men or women, is that most of them have some kind of a narcissistic disorder, personality disorder,
Correct.
which gives them that intense belief that everything centers around them.
Right.
They own the child, and if somebody is capable of providing equal and equal amount of love and caring to the child, they feel threatened in that kind of situation. So these are the actual underlying reasons for this.
It's kind of treating the child as a property, which
Yes.
and not really as a human being, which is so unfortunate.
Mhm.
Kiran, we have discussed this as length. I think we should have actually, I should have asked this question in the beginning itself. But just in a very brief, could you give us one or two examples? And I would prefer if you could give me an example of a mother who was a left behind parent and a father who was a left behind parent. Could you share some examples which are very heartbreaking of what is the kind of extremist attitude that the courts take in India and deny the access. I personally, I will not take the full name, but I personally know one case where Ruchi reached out to me, and I have followed her posts, and it's quite a heartbreaking story. The way she yearns for her daughter, and of course there are other cases as well. I've been in touch with Jay, and I know as a grandmother what's happening to her. But if you could tell me one or two case studies like that for people who are listening to this and people who are unaware about this, or what happened, or
Yeah, I'd like to highlight a few cases which kind of reflect on the some of the worst case scenarios, right? So there is one Mr. Brian Tavares. He hails from Goa, but he settled in California for a long time now. His children got abducted in August of 2017.
Mhm.
And till this day, he has no contact, zero contact. He does not know where his kids are, what state they are in, nothing. And this is the guy who regularly took them to school and fed them, gave them shower and stuff like the very involved guy. And the funny thing is, it's not funny actually. It's very reflective of the way the Indian courts deal with the system. His wife is went on a tourist visa. It's not even a resident OCI or PIO visa kind of thing.
Mhm.
She went on a tourist visa with the kids, and she's remained there. And the courts are themselves saying that she's domiciled in India. How much more ridiculous can this become? Somebody who is a foreign citizen who goes on a tourist visa to India, and then suddenly automatically they claim domicile. Is this how the concept of domicile works in India? That's this very unfortunate that even after showing all this.
Or to any extent, does that happen in cases where the father is the abductor, or does it usually happen in the cases where the mother is the abductor?
It is commonplace. So what we have seen is that the for some reason the courts, for them, for the judges and the courts, there is a certain nationalist sentiment that is there. They
Mm,
think that India is the best. India is the best, and that trumps everything else.
right.
Even the a child's basic need for a parent, whether it is India or foreign born or whatever, it doesn't matter. The child's needs does not matter. It's for some reason the child is in India. We are the protector of the child. We have to do this for the child. This is the very typical sentiment we have seen among the judges.
That is
It really beats me why they cannot understand basic needs of the child. So another case I want to highlight is one Miss Nidhi Sharma. She hails from Punjab. Her child got abducted 2 times from India to US once, and she did everything possible to get her visas, and which all got destroyed by her in-laws. She made very brave attempt and fled to the came to the US after her child. And the day she lands in the US, her husband abducted the child back to India through some other countries. So two times. And the government authorities failed totally. She kept on top of both US and Indian police officials and the district attorneys in the US and pleaded with them. Please, this is going to happen. Please, block the airports and prevent this abduction. And it didn't happen. And sadly, last in 2017, the abducting parent also he died, and now the child is with the grandparents, and still she does not have access to the kid. Can you believe this? This is the horrible state of affairs. This is the horrible state of affairs where the courts will let the child grow up with no parents. Even that is okay by them.
But as long as the child is in India.
Yes.
That is actually very unfortunate. What are the major legal hurdles? We have heard from you that the laws are very on the religion basis or on other basis, very hodgepodge. There's no clear direction.
Yeah.
Feminist intervention, feminist organization intervention is as such that it's they don't want the issue to be resolved in a very mature way. Apart from this, could you tell me a little about the Hague Convention on these issues? How do other countries go about these things, and why do you think India is treating this in a different way?
Yeah, I'll point out some of the legal hurdles. I think that will give a good segue to Hague. So first and foremost is that there is a lack of discipline in the courts. They take over jurisdiction when they should not be. That is the first thing. And that is very central to Hague. In Hague, there is concept of habitual residence of a child. So as long as if you go to a court where the child does not have habitual residence status, then they are supposed to reject that application for custody or anything. So that is lacking in India. Second is they don't understand things like parental alienation and concepts like that. And because of that,
what is the basic remedy that Hague provides, which is not available in India?
Yes, very, very good point. This is very important in the Indian context because Indian courts, even if they take over jurisdiction, it is not that the matter is settled in 1 year or less. No, it drags and drags and drags until the child is old enough and end of story. The child is become an adult, right? So the Hague, first of all, provides a very strict timeline. It's 6 to 12 months. The matter has to be resolved.
Right.
And it's a legal process too, where the legal machinery itself has to be set up so that the other party has got a chance to rebut and things like that. It's not as yes, once you apply, you got a child back. No.
Right.
Secondly, Hague is not even about custody. It is about restoring the child back to from where it was disrupted.
Right.
And let that court figure out what is the best custody. That court can very well say, oh, this child is better left off in India, and they can return to India. Correct. If the case circumstances goes that way.
Yeah.
So that is what the Hague provides. Hague provides a guaranteed timeline for resolution. That is very critical because from my experience with India, these things drag on for years and we lose contact with the child. The child has lost one parent.
Correct.
And it takes a huge emotional and financial toll on the left behind parents. Correct. Very, very big.
So I think this obviously answers the question. It is important for India to sign this because so that these matters can be resolved in a faster way and in a proper way, and probably. So what happens if India is a signatory to the Hague? Then these issues will be decided in the habitual residency of the parent, of the child that you're talking about, right?
Yes. Yes.
All right. One very important question, Kiran, because this is really not about parents as we've been discussing. This is really about the rights of the child, and which is the, though our courts say that whatever judgments or whatever decision they take in these cases are from the point of view of welfare of the child, but I honestly feel that anything but welfare of the child is usually adhered to here. Have you been able to interact at all? I know you are connected with a lot of left behind parents, uh, and probably you could bring this from the experience of your own kids as well, as in you are going through this issue as well. What is the impact of all of this on the children? How do they deal with it? What is their emotional trauma? What happens with them when they're sort of um, uh, treated like a tussle between two parents, and what is their experience usually like, and do they not have any choice in their matter to say something in the court in India?
Yeah, that's a very important question. So I've been reading this book by one Amy Baker. She has written a book called Adult Children of Parental Alienation Syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
So it is a book solely dedicated to talking to children who are now adults, children of parental abduction and alienation, who have now become adults. And it talks in great detail of what their feelings are,
Mm-hmm.
how different people have evolved after this episode. And it's a very sad book to read. Different people grow up in different ways after this episode. Some kids did not even marry. They did not even trust anyone anymore because of the way their parents handled the situation. They did not trust anyone. So they ended up alienating themselves from both parents. The abducting parent, because the abducting parent forced them into this situation, and the left behind parent for one of the two reasons. One could be that they thought that the left behind parent did not fight enough for them.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Understand.
Second is that they did not even want to have a bond with the left behind because they don't know that person.
Yeah, that's right.
They didn't spend any time with that person, so they don't know the person. So this is some kids became like this. There are other kids who grew up and adopted the mentality that they also are have the right to abduct their own kids if they had the problem. And some kids grew up and abducted their own children also. So this also happened. And these are the kind of sorry stories. Basically, I think it is a confused situation for the children
I think
when.
would be. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Kiran, but I think it would be a very, very bigger, not just emotional turmoil, but functional turmoil as well. Because I understand the education system abroad is very different from what it is in India. The cultures are extremely different. The way of life is completely different. So, just rooting out the person from a very different environment and putting this child into an absolutely different environment, it would be a lot of challenges as well, not just emotional, but a lot of other. I'm thinking this from the point of view that I used to be in Chandigarh, and I used to study in Chandigarh in my 8th, 9th, 10th standard, and in my 11th, I came to a very small town where the mentality of people was different, the way they behaved was different. It took me months to adjust into that environment, and there was a lot of bullying, there was a lot of ridiculing, humiliation, because probably they thought that I've come from an environment which is richer than them. So, that's the way they put me down. And I don't know, it took me quite a while to actually adjust myself to that situation. And I can only imagine what would happen to kids who are just, And this is, I'm talking about a bigger city and a smaller town.
Mhm.
And here we are talking about a situation which has changed of entire cultures and country and whatnot. So I think it would be quite a challenge for these children.
It is, yeah, and that's why the the stress is on expeditious return, because the more the time is spent away from the other place, the more traumatic it is for the child to even be returned. Even we should also consider the child's viewpoint. Now, my son has been there in India for 5 years. It's going to be a struggle for him to come back and adjust here. It's for sure, and it would be very unparently of me to abruptly do that for him.
Correct.
It's not right. So
Yeah.
that is why the period of return is the critical one. That is what Hague tries to enforce in some way. And we the other thing that we also miss is that, Deepika, a family is not just parents, it is also the extended family. These are things that bring a spice to our life. The aunts, uncles, and niece, nephews, cousins, all these things. All that is, for the most part, it's gone for these kids. They just know one side of the family. And how bad can it be?
Very true. Kiran, why are feminists so, and I know I've had very bitter arguments with some feminists who are, deeply involved into this and have their own view about it. And
Mhm.
one of them blogged me too for, raising questions on her stance. But what is the peak? Why are feminists so opposed to India being a signatory to Hague? I
I
understand the
think,
funding part, of course. I mean, if there won't be any issues, then what would they really fight for or take funding for? But what's the fundamental belief? Let's assume there are no ulterior motives to this. But
okay.
what is their understanding, or what is their inherent belief that they're not willing to change and listen to the other side?
Okay, so you're saying, you're asking me for a reason other than the
Finance.
um,
Let's
okay.
so let's so I'll tell you where I'm coming from. A lot of people, when they try to ridicule what I do, they usually would, or it happens on both the sides, on the feminists and any other organization or ideology with an opposing view. Uh, Usually the way we would try and ridicule that argument is that there's a financial interest involved and that's why this person has a certain thing. But I'm of a very strong belief that we are what we are because of the beliefs, and our beliefs are because of the experiences that we have. So my belief and my understanding of any issue is on the basis of what I experience daily. And what I experience daily is basically hearing things from the male point of view, with the work that I
Yeah.
do, listening to the men, listening to their ordeals, so that's why I have shaped my opinions and beliefs, and they probably would be colluded because of that, because of the what I see every day. And I have a lot of people, condemn the feminist argument, saying, they have financial interest and they have, they're very biased towards women as well. But what I say is, listen, they are who they are because of the experiences that they have on daily basis. The way we listen to men who are violated, abused, or are on the wrong side of the law, they meet up and interact with women, who come to them with their problems. So, their stories are very, limited in their perspective. Our stories are very limited in their perspective, and that's why they think like that and we think like this. So it's a very, sometimes you have an emotional connect with something which may not
Yeah.
really, because of any interests, and that's what I'm saying. So let's forget the funding part. What's the fundamental belief? Because the feminist that I'm talking
Yeah.
about used to think that she is a bit rational, but obviously she behaved in a very different way, which I don't know the reasons why. But apart from, the financial interest, or maybe any, what is a fundamental belief here which they are not probably understanding the other side of?
Yeah, so that goes back to, I think, Actually, this book, the same book that I talked about on the Parental, talks about that from a woman's perspective, why they do that, why they might do that, some of them, right? So women give birth to children, right? So they have that inherent biology that kind of makes them have those strong productive beliefs that they are the rightful persons to raise the children and
Yeah.
provide them nurturing and all that stuff. And I this book says that when that area of theirs is being encroached, where there is a perception of encroachment by the male, they feel that their role is being threatened. They feel that they are not their full selves. They cannot be their. They cannot be their. They cannot perform their role to the full extent, to something like that. So that this is one of the reasons that I'm not talking about feminists doing this, but for women to indulge in such a um, abduction kind of or alienation kind of thing, because
Maybe just
um,
basically.
right, it's the same thing that even that happens in the other way also, right? Like traditionally, a lot of roles in employment, this thing was male dominated, and as soon as women started coming to that kind of role, there is some inherent friction that happens,
Yeah.
and there is some adjustment that has to happen. So these are some of the things that that book goes into, that why some people might be inclined to have those strong beliefs that it should be this way.
Right, right, right. And I think it's obviously a judicially. I think it's a very lucrative area. If I'm not wrong, I mean, like the
It
lawyers,
is, and it's also
Supreme Court, and then we have a very nasty perspective in India that all the NRIs are extremely rich people, and you can. I think there's a lot of financial also involved in this.
yeah. And one more thing is that you realize that the Ministry of Child is also under the Ministry of Women, right? So there is a conflict right there. There's a conflict, and for women to if they if they let go of something, they lose the votes. The vote bank is very strong, and they don't want to lose that. So that's why they don't want to.
Focus only on women abducting. I really wish to know why, when the fathers abduct the child, what are the reasons? Or maybe you can very briefly touch upon uh, why, because the perspective is, the normal perspective is कि कोई भी अपने बच्चे को डिस्कम्फर्ट क्यों करना चाहेगा, कोई भी अपने बच्चे को उसके माता से या पिता से अलग क्यों करना चाहेगा, कोई तो बहुत ज्यादा कंपेलिंग रीजन होगा जिसकी वजह से कोई भी पेरेंट इस एक्सटेंट तक, these are normal, you know understanding of these issues that I'm talking about, which come out of very presumptuous notions. But tell me, very briefly tell me, Kiran, कि क्या रीजंस हो सकते हैं कि कोई एक माँ अपने बच्चे को लेकर दूसरी कंट्री में फ्ली कर जाएगी, या एक बाप अपने बच्चे को लेकर दूसरी कंट्री में फ्ली हो जाएगा, अपार्ट फ्रॉम ऑब्वियस रीजंस लाइक डोमेस्टिक वायलेंस या violent nature of the parent. Apart from these,
I think it starts with generally some kind of conflict in the marriage itself. That is the seed for, I think, some of these differences. And some people use the children as a tool to get back at the other parent for doing that, for whatever differences they have, right? So it's a very easy situation to use a child who is innocent, and you can, bend them according to how you need. The other pattern that we have seen amongst most of these abducting parents is the interference or influence from the in-laws. We have seen that a lot of times, even though that possibility of abduction may not have existed just like that, because of the influence of the in-laws and all those things, it tips them over that, and makes them act. So that is one more pattern that we have seen a lot of times. And then, of course, anyone that is not having a very strong tie to the foreign country, like having a home or having a full-fledged employment or that. So any such, if there are loose bonds, then it's very easy to break and go to a comfort zone, like which is India in most of the cases, right? I mean, that's where they grew up. So
Right.
that's their comfort zone. They just run away there, and they disregard the children's interest in that matter. That's a sorry thing, because civil remedies are readily available for this. You can very well settle it in a civil way. Go to the courts, apply for divorce, apply for custody, and figure out a custody arrangement. Where the child can visit back and forth and things like that. But they don't do that.
Right. What is the Indian government perspective on this? In very briefly, though you have spoken about it in your responses. Is the Indian government, heavily influenced by the feminist argument on this issue?
Yes, I think they have been railroaded to some extent. So the Indian government is three things. Three things I've noted down. One is denial. So they are in denial that there is a serious problem. Despite Law Commission, 2 times they have recommended already that India should ratify Hague. Law Commission 2 reports, and one was as recent as 2017 or so.
What are the numbers so that people who may be interested in knowing more about this issue can read those reports? What are the numbers of the Law Commission reports?
Yes, Law Commission report 218 was the first one that came out, which recommended that India accede to the Hague. And Law Commission report 263 came out in 2017, I guess. That not only did it recommend Hague, it went to the extent that they should penalize the abducting parent as well for committing this crime. So it was made into a crime as well.
But then if we had 2 Law Commission reports, then why Justice Bindal's report was necessary?
That is a very good question for which we don't have answer. Why have these Law Commission reports when they are not being acted upon? And the Ministry of Women and Child Development did try to do some action as if they are acting on it, but that got railroaded by the Bindal Commission report that came out. So in 2018, a lot of left behind parents, as well as the abducting parents, we participated in the Bindal committee that was formed to review the Law Commission 263 report and see if India can consider acceding to the Hague. Unfortunately, the Bindal Commission report, first of all, did not take into consideration any expert advice on parental alienation. Secondly, they wrongly painted a picture that it's all women that are being running away.
Yes, I have read a bit of that report, and it's very unfortunate. This is, I mean, very, very skewed understanding of this. If you read Bindal's report, then you would perhaps believe that it is 90% women who are, fleeing with the kids. There's no existence of fathers, doing the same, which is so untrue.
Right. And actually, that Bindal report got railroaded by the report sent by Indira Jaisingh's organization, NGO. And the irony is that Indira Jaisingh had recommended actually accession to the Hague way back in 1984 or something of that sort. So it's, you see how once they come to know that there's a lot of business to be done with these international abductions, they rather keep the issue alive than fix it.
Which is very important. I think has presented Karishma Kapoor's husband in one of these cases, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah.
She stressed upon shared parenting at that time, and I think she has a very different stand in this report, if I'm not wrong. But nonetheless, so I think I can understand one of the major issues is denial, as you said, not accepting that there's an issue at all. Then heavily influenced.
And actually apathy. There is a very great amount of apathy towards children's trauma in general. Why is this even being considered a husband and wife dispute. No, it is not. It is a child abduction issue. The victim is here is a child.
Right.
There are enough laws in both US, UK, or whatever in India for two spouses to settle their differences in whatever way, financial and all those things. But what we are talking about here is children's rights. That is not being considered by this whole thing. They are just um, they are overwhelming the whole issue, painting it like as a husband-wife dispute that has to be settled for the sake of husband and wife. No, we need to settle this for the sake of the children.
Right. And while we are discussing this, something that comes to my mind, Kiran, and in case you keep abreast of what's happening legally in India is, we recently had this um, uh, uh, 497 being taken, being dismissed as a law of adultery. And one of the major arguments was that a wife is not chattel of the husband, for him to decide who she can have sexual relationship with or and not. And one of the major arguments of the feminists was that wife is not the chattel of the husband. But I see something absolutely different happening here, where you are treating a child as the property of the mother or the father.
Yeah.
And here you do not have any problem with that. But in case of adultery, although these are non-comparative comparable issues, but still it's about a human being governed by the choices and demands of the other. Anyways, we will move forward towards the end of this discussion. Kiran, there are a lot of left behind parents, and I know there are some groups and collectives formed where people like these can go and seek support. Could you share what can a parent who is caught into those situations where that they or he or she has being denied the access of their children? What can they do? What are the support groups available, and how can they really join, or what help can they seek?
Yeah, so there are a lot of organizations all over the world that might be a good point of contact. The challenge is that in a lot of our cases, the abduction, since India is not a Hague signatory, the abduction situation becomes a custody and a divorce dispute rather than an abduction dispute. So, since those kind of laws are very specific to each country, most of the organizations are country specific. For example, in the US, we have two organizations that volunteer to, kind of provide guidance of some sort to parents who get involved. One is bringourkidshome.org, and other one is fight-ipca.org, .com, sorry. So these are two websites that people can reach out to and send any information they have. And the folks managing these websites will do the due diligence to forward the request to some of the international contacts that we have as a network of left behind parents from all over the world. And we also have other WhatsApp groups where we just not only just give legal or whatever guidance, but we also act as some kind of emotional support group as well, because this is a very unique challenge. Not many people can relate to what's going on in our heads, and I think only parents like us can be the good form of support for them.
Right. And what can a normal Indian, what can a common Indian listening to this discussion can do? How can they do anything that could probably help parents?
Yes. Let me speak to that. Yes.
And while you
So,
answer this, to anybody who is listening to this hangout, if you have any questions, please drop me those questions either on my Facebook post regarding this discussion or on Twitter, because I'm not able to see the feed live. or your questions live right now while we are doing this. So if you have any questions that you want Kiran to answer, could you please drop me either an email on deepikanarayan@gmail.com, deepikanaran@gmail.com, or you could drop a comment on Facebook or on Twitter, and I shall have Kiran answer to your questions. Yes, Kiran, tell me.
Yeah, so from a parental abduction perspective, is very international in nature, and I'm sure there are a lot of domestic cases in India as well. But the fundamental issue is also about changing the culture and mindset in India towards accepting shared parenting. So towards that, I think it, it it makes good sense that uh, folks in India continue to push for shared parenting as the rule, not as an exception.
Okay.
It should be the first thing that the court should avoid, as default custody arrangement. It should be shared parenting, and only when challenged with the real problems, or only then it should be an exception to provide different kind of custody arrangement. So that is one thing. Second is, a lot of these child rights are governed by India's ratification of international convention called United Nations Convention on Rights of Child. India is a signatory to that for a long time, I think since 1990 or so.
Mhm.
And they should, the folks in India, the head should approach the Ministry of Women and Child Development, as well as National Commission on Protection of Child Rights, NCPCR,
Mhm.
and push them to make amendments in laws to be compliant with the UNCRC obligations of India. That's very critical, because right now the laws are from 1890. The Gardens and Wards Act is from 1890. How can you believe a society in 2020, following the laws of say 2 centuries old? That's not possible. And third thing is that the Ministry of Women and Child Development has pushed for a lot of standard operating protocols in a lot of these district courts to handle sexual offenses like the POXO Act and all that stuff.
Mhm.
Similarly, they should introduce such standard operating protocols for ensuring that the children do not get affected by long-term litigations. So these kind of steps have to be taken by the government of India, and it is best when the citizenry of India pushes for these things, because this is ultimately the citizenry of India are going to benefit from all these things. And once these things become the norm in India, then issues like international parental child abduction will follow suit. It becomes a natural progression to that solution as well.
Mhm. All right. I am just looking at some of the comments finally. Um,
Okay.
if anybody has a specific questions, please let me know. Is there any petition or anything, Kiran, that people could sign to probably bring more attention to this? Is there anything apart from what you've already discussed that people could do?
There is nothing um, active right now, but if there are any left behind parents here listening on this conversation, we are sending a grievance to the International Court of Justice on behalf of several left behind parents from all over the world,
That is a very
um,
that is a very good step.
making them know about these issues with India. So hopefully that will give it some due attention at the international arena as well.
Right. A lot of people are talking about 498, especially left behind parents who are fathers, which is very obvious that the woman would come to India and file a dowry case and a domestic violence complaint. Do you have any particular message for fathers like that, Kiran?
Um, I don't have any message because I have not been a victim of that. But thankfully,
You have or you have
but I know,
not?
I know. What is that?
You have not been.
Yeah, I have not been.
That's good.
But I know a lot of parents who have been, and it's a very unfortunate situation because they are very hardworking people trying to retain a job here. Most of them are on visas, and they cannot afford to risk going to India to see their kids and getting into all sorts of trouble with their, bread and butter. That's the biggest challenge. So I would say that stay strong and be an advocate. It's always very powerful to be an advocate for change,
Right.
and it's only the squeaky wheel gets whatever thing, right? There's a saying, right? So unless you make noise, things are not going to change. So if it is anyone that can make noise, it is us parents who understand this issue very deeply, who experience this issue very deeply every day. It is we who can bring about a change. So continue to advocate at every chance possible. Um, and let people know that these kind of problems are there so that the culture shifts as well.
Correct. And for those who are listening to this, especially fathers who are left behind, parents who have issues to deal with in terms of false allegations, which are very easy to be filed in India under 498A, domestic violence, and all of these. Well, I hope you're aware that there are organizations in India that are helping people who are stuck with false 498 cases. So I would advise you all to get in touch with organizations like Sahodar by Shoni Kapoor, Save Indian Family Foundation, Save Indian Family, and there are a lot of other organizations that you can get in touch with. There are individuals who are helping in their own a lot of people. And like I think Kiran just said, be the advocate for change, understand what the laws in the country are. And of late, there have been several guidelines. There is a Rajesh Kumar judgment by the Supreme Court. There is Rajesh Sharma judgment by the Supreme Court. Although the Family Welfare Committee relief has been struck down, and the judgment was sort of reassessed by the Supreme Court. But there are reliefs, a lot of reliefs that still remain. So make use of them. Connect with other NRIs who are facing not the issue of child abduction, but they are facing false accusations and how they are dealing with it. I'm sure there are examples of people who have successfully handled their cases in India without their parents being harassed or being taken for a ride. So I think it's all about being there and getting involved and just having the patience to deal with it. It's extremely difficult. It's extremely emotionally draining. I can completely understand, and I talk to people who are dealing with these situations on a daily basis. But trust me, there is no other solution other than fighting. And I think, Kiran, you would know that there is no other solution as
Yeah.
such we have apart from staying afoot, trying hard to bring a change in other people's lives and their own lives as well. There is a question by Anand who says, where can one find the details about the ICJ petition and how can one become a part of it or lend their help to it?
Um, yes, to become part of the ICJ petition, please contact Fight. I repeat, please contact fight-ipca.com. There's a contact us page on that website. And if you send a note, we will be able to guide you accordingly. The website is www.fight-ipca.com.
All right. I think we have pretty much discussed a lot of things in this session. I personally would request anybody watching this to read the Justice Bindal's report on this issue and no offense meant, but I think it's a highly biased report and something that needs to be reviewed and be understood in a non-partisan, non-biased way, and written in a similar manner as well, by including every entity involved in this. And like Kiran said, not just the parents, but the grandparents as well, because at least in the Indian society, we are not very silo families. We have parents, we have grandparents, and I think it's about the rights of the children, about rights of the families involved as well. Thank you so much for sparing your time, Kiran, and thank you for sharing all the knowledge that you have. Been a pleasure talking to you, and if I could be of any help to your group, please let me know.
Sure.
And if there are any documentary filmmakers out there listening to our conversation, please see if this subject excites you to make something really meaningful on this. And thank you so much for joining, everyone. And for those who wish to contact, like Kiran has said, there are two websites. You can reach out to them. I'll post their addresses in the description of this video as well. Thanks once again for joining me, and I hope to come back and have one more meaningful discussion with all of you with our next speaker. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you, Kiran, for joining us.
Thanks very much, Deepika.
Yeah, bye.
Bye. Thank you, guys.